Greetings, everybody. Welcome to G4G News here on G4G. I'm your host, Napalm Dawn, and today we're talking about a topic that started last week that unfortunately just doesn't want to seem to go away. And not in a good way, really. It's just kind of like one of those pimples that you watch on Dr. Pimple Popper that doesn't quite go away until the core is out of it. And sadly, who knows when the core will be out of this one. So, in case you haven't heard, last week on July 4th, two ArenaNet devs managed to get themselves in a bit of Twitter controversy, and it sparked some tweets that wound up in the firing of Jessica Price and Peter Fries, who worked for ArenaNet, mostly on the Guild Wars 2 MMO. So, the topic has continued to come around because recently Polygon decided to get an exclusive interview with her and get her response to the firing, and also the head of ArenaNet has come out and given a rather lengthy public response himself. So how this all starts is that Jessica Price, who works for ArenaNet, and as you can see on her Twitter profile, says game producer, writer, editor, Howling Mated, ArenaNet narrative team, former, obsessed with Linus's salty language I block often, I won't play demure for you. So already you kind of get a little bit of an idea as to what you're dealing with over here. I can't say that people go around asking randos to just play demure for them, but okay. We'll go with what the profile says. So it all starts with her saying, since I spent all kinds of time saying it on a Reddit AMA, and I haven't talked about actual game dev on Twitter in a while, here's a thread about writing for the PC character in an MMO. So, this is going to be key later on, she establishes in her profile who she works for, and she starts a thread midway through July 3rd talking about her job. And it's about 20 posts long. And essentially what she's saying is that when you are writing for an RPG, an offline RPG, people kind of know what they're getting at. They know what's happening when they're playing Corvo in Dishonored. They know what it's like to play Lara Croft in Tomb Raider and, the BioShock characters, Drake, all of the games like that. Kratos, God of War, as I'm actively playing on the PlayStation 4 right now. And she kind of goes on to say they were designed by somebody else, so you sort of retract your responses and emotions based on what the character does. You might not think the character reacts that way, but you sort of accept, okay, the character is going to do this thing because that's how it's designed, that's how it's programmed to do. She's saying that it essentially is much harder to do that for MMOs because they have to be more of an empty vessel, and you have to be able to put more of yourself into it. So in other words, the character has to be like a little bit more blank so that your own personality gets in there, and hopefully you don't get the clashes, and you can inject your own personality in the character. Well, after this 25 some odd post thread over here, a well-known GW2 streamer by the name of Del Noir comes in and says, okay, really, really great discussion. I like what I'm seeing here. However, I disagree with one small component of it. And does not attack her in any way, shape, or form. Does not bring gender into it or bias or any outside factors other than the fact that he disagreed with a slight comment on it. And she immediately kind of loses her mind at this point in time. And she responds with, today, in being a female game dev, allow me, a person who does not work with you, to explain to you how to do your job. First of all, he never explained to her how you do a job. He offered an opinion. When things started to get out of hand, he came back to the thread and said, I'm sorry, I thought this was a place for discourse. I simply wanted to talk about it. I will delete my post, and all I was doing was trying to open a conversation about this. And unless he established himself as also being in the same industry and also being a writer for games and everything he offered was going to be an opinion, and you knew it was going to be an established opinion. Now, never to undermine the work of females in the gaming industry, the IT industry. I have a good friend at work who is a dev. My own girlfriend has been doing dev for some time now, and I've definitely heard their stories. There is a problem, and it probably will continue to be as such until more and more women break into a male-dominated industry and field, and hopefully the ship absolutely rights itself. It's not fair to immediately have your code critiqued excessively simply because you're female. However, in this case, that is not what is going on. A discussion was attempted to have been had, and Jessica kind of loses her mind on this guy and reacts quite violently to it, and obviously didn't play demure and was probably looking very, very close to blocking. As this guy says over here, it was kind of a very narcissistic response to it. Now, things get out of hand really quickly as she begins to use phrases like rando asshat and just kind of making it be about not what it's about. The problem comes into play here also when Peter Fries comes to her defense and says, these are our private social media accounts. Imagine you're an astronomer sharing some things, research project, blah, blah, blah. And he says she never asked for his criticism. Now, if you are going to post something publicly and you are going to allow responses and you are going to not simply have a locked thread, as we've all seen on forums or people's Facebooks and everything like that, essentially all you're doing is speaking into an echo chamber. You are putting the soup can in front of your mouth and just talking into it, and you have no desire to engage in conversation whatsoever. And when you look through Jessica's Twitter, you will find that that is pretty much what she does. If you go down through a lot of her posts and everything, you will find that she will reply to people who talk to her about her stuff and say like, oh, this is a really good thread, blah, 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 and can I hashtag it? There was one where somebody said, this is a really interesting thread, can I hashtag it? And she responds and says, yeah, that's cool. So chances are, of her 14.1k followers, she doesn't work with and know 14.1k people directly in life. These are not all her real life friends over here. There are people who are following her and tweeting to her that are internet people. Therefore, she is in a public forum. So to put something out there and then not accept discourse on it, what you are is looking for is just an echo chamber. And she says over here, the attempts of fans to exert ownership over our personal lives and times are something I'm hardcore about stopping. You don't own me, I don't owe you. Since we have a lot of hurt man feels today, let me make something clear. This is my feed. I'm not on the dock here. I'm not your emotional courtesan because I'm a dev. Don't expect me to pretend to like you here, like the next rando asshat who attempts to explain the concept of branching dialogue to me as if you know, having worked in game narrative for a fucking decade, and I've never heard of it, is getting insta-blocked. PSA. I mean, this is a person who clearly has gone batshit. And who she reminds me of is somebody that I spent a lot of time listening to on Sid Alpha's channel, Alex Maurer. Alex Maurer's issues with her Star Mazer and her work and fighting the dev and literally having a judicial ruling come down against her and then breaking it because she's batshit. That's what Jessica reminds me of. And we'll do our little sum up over here on Peter so that we can be done to him. But he makes it about gender also. This is a shocking development that I definitely haven't seen happen to every female coworker over and over again. Just calling it like I see it. I've only been in game dev for 25 years. And finally, he talks about somebody else who had done some Guild Wars story writing, and this guy Ben over here is like, okay, now we're talking about the right stuff. And then, yes, please come at me and tell me how MMO content should be created whenever I muse online about writing within the constraints of my medium. Listen, you go to the places on the internet where you have the support, and only that support, if that's what you want to do. If you're going to talk about something publicly, hey, that's Twitter, that's Facebook, that's anywhere where you can have a post. It's Reddit, it's a guild forum, it's a clan forum, it's wherever. If you're going to post something, you have to expect some kind of a response. If you just want to make an announcement, like, hey, I'm having a baby, like when you send out, it used to be that you would like send out baby announcement cards. That's a one-way communication. Hey, I'm having a baby. Boom. Here's a cigar. That's an announcement. That's not asking for any kind of a response. But that's not what the internet is. It's not what Twitter is. It's not what Facebook is. So we're done with Peter over here. The guy, he admits somewhere in here, he's like, yeah, I know her, she's great, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of reeks of white knighting to a certain degree. But hey, teams that stick together, I certainly appreciate it. However, don't come to somebody's defense and then be totally fucking wrong and say, hey, these are our private social media accounts. No, they're not. I'm viewing her account right now. Ergo, it's not private. You can do that on Twitter, by the way. So, here's Polygon's latest article on it. And, I mean, they at least state he's a prominent Guild Wars 2 streamer and a YouTuber. And he even has a character named after him in the game. If she works so tightly with the game, how does she not know that? And that's perhaps where she got in a super lot of trouble for this. Also, before we move on to Polygon's article over here, I want to mention something. Jessica Price is also the one who said, when Total Biscuit died, the thing that's good about him basically passing away is that he can no longer do any harm. Wow. Imagine being a member of Total Biscuit's family. Imagine being his wife and coming across that quote. I mean, granted, she's not the only one who's done it, and it's her response has been more underground than some others. But imagine reading that, hey, he's gone and can't do anybody any more harm. This woman is a PR nightmare, and before you get into Polygon's article over here, there's something that I have to establish. If you've been a member of my channel for a while, and you've watched my videos, you've been to the streams when I was streaming Marvel Avengers Alliance, you probably have encountered that I'm a member of the IT field. That's not how I started off. I actually went through college for a communications degree, and it switched from a focus of ORCOM, organizational communication, into PR. So when it comes to this stuff, this is my wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff that I would have to be working on if I worked at ArenaNet. This would be a public relations case. And I would have to find ways of dealing with the press and helping people say what they're going to do and working on damage control and everything. And I can tell you, no bias aside or anything other than that, looking at some of the things Jessica has done in the public eye while virtually wearing the ArenaNet tag, she is a PR nightmare. Between this tweet, several others, and especially the Total Biscuit one, that is some serious, serious issues. Imagine if you could go back in time to the late 80s, early 90s. There's not really any net out there. Media is in its classic form, print media, TV media. Steven Spielberg puts out a movie and it doesn't do well. And one of the duo of Siskel and Ebert sits there and says that the movie, in 80s terms, 90s terms, is garbo. Okay. So one of those two, if not both, don't like the movie. And then imagine 3 years later, Spielberg is about ready to put out another movie, and one of the duo dies. Or maybe both of them die. Maybe they're in a plane crash and they both pass away. And somebody is interviewing Spielberg right before his new movie comes out, and they ask him, how do you feel about two prominent media critics, Siskel and Ebert, passing away in their plane crash? And because he was a little salty that his last movie was reviewed poorly, he's like, well, I just have to say that if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. At least they're not doing anybody any more harm. Can you imagine the nuclear fallout that you would see from that? How that would be spun around the globe in the late 80s, early 90s version of something going viral, that Steven Spielberg is essentially saying he's glad that Siskel and Ebert have passed away. That's what she did when she made that tweet about Total Biscuit. And chances are, I don't even know if Total Biscuit has ever directly reviewed Guild Wars 2 or a section of the game that she worked on or anything like that. Because there was Direct Pride, if he did anything about something she worked on. And then there's Team or Environment Pride, where she will take up the cause for Guild Wars 2 if somebody's crossing Guild Wars 2 because that's the company she works for, that's the game she works for. Maybe they're not calling out a piece that she worked on, but she has pride in her environment. So if somebody slams it, she's going to be upset. I don't know if that ever happened with him. However, you don't come out and publicly say that. And you don't come out and publicly say that when you are wearing the badge of your employer. If you are going to announce on your quote-unquote private Twitter that you are an ArenaNet dev, you speak with that badge on you. And I'm not talking about if she went to McDonald's and had bad service and was like, I'm never going back to the McDonald's on Main Street again, their burgers are like cardboard, or she gets upset that Southwest Airlines rebooks her because they're overbooked but not the guy sitting next to her, or posts that Red Robin Burgers is the best burgers ever. Sure, that's not really wearing your employee's badge on it, but when you are talking about things within the industry, you are. And that is a fact of life. And sometimes people forget about that on the internet. And then they learn that lesson when they wind up taking a picture of themselves taking a bath in the dish sink at the back of the restaurant when it's closed, and it goes public on social media and they get fired. Or how about people that tweeted like, yay, this new stinking job and I already hate my boss, and then they get fired before they even walk in the first door. It happens and people don't learn. Anyway, until last week, Price worked as a narrative designer in Guild Wars 2. She wrote a lengthy Twitter thread about it. Dwar called it out. And the Guild Wars Reddit got really, really upset about it. Now, there is this belief that there is this angry mob mentality that spawned out of Reddit and pointed the finger at her and said, "We don't like her, we will get her fired." And as if it was the hand of God that it happened. That's how she likes to spin it. And here we go with that. So Price was called into a meeting with the manager from Narrative Department, a human resources person, and the ArenaNet president, Mike O'Brien. I was given no opportunity to argue my case. My manager was on vacation. O'Brien spent some time insisting that developers must be friends with the company's customers, that it was unacceptable to say that we aren't, even when we're not on the clock. He told me I look back on this and regret it, because we were doing great work and I ruined it. And here's this giant quote of, "He had the power to command a woman to stand there." Doesn't it almost read like a book commercial? Like you would flip the book over of a hardcover you wanted to buy, and that would be the tagline of it. "He had the power to command a woman to stand there." That's a really good superpower there. Man, let's ridiculous. Yes, of course he did. He has the power to command anybody in his fucking company to do that. He's the president. It's not that he had the power to command a woman to do it. He had the power to command an employee to do it. Are we forgetting he probably commanded Fries to do the same thing? Nope, because this is about her. Price later discovered that colleague Peter Fries, who had defended her in the social media thread, was also fired. 0 warnings. Now, this is a sticky point in this. Supposedly, she has said, they knew how I was online. They knew my online persona. They hired me anyway. They were in with it. They were like, "No, we like what you're doing. We like what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. We like you speaking the truth on issues and everything like that." However, that does not work when you are making up a truth that doesn't exist. You can't sit there and make this "I'm a woman, Dev, this is a problem" issue, when that was never ever the case from the get-go. And they promised me that I wouldn't have to check my identity at the door. They said they admired my willingness to speak up about issues in the industry. This was not an issue in the industry. I mean, if the person who posted the response, if Dewar was female, would it be this way? If Jessica was a guy and got this comment to her, would it be this way? They wanted us to speak up about the ugly things. Well, this wasn't an ugly thing. This was about as pleasant as you can get. This was the tea and scones of the internet. Their pinkies should have been out for this, but instead Jessica wants to fling her cup of hot tea in the guy's face and stand up and demand that he pay the check and walked out. So now, ArenaNet, it's devastating that a company talking all the talk folded like a cheap card table the first time their values were tested. Yeah, their values were tested, and they stuck by them. They stuck by them that they have employees that represent the company's best interest in the public light. Calling people rando asshats and making this a gender-based argument when it wasn't is not in the company's best interest. And when Peter comes along and backs it up and says, this is what I've seen and this is what happened, and she didn't ask for his opinion. This is a private space. No, it's not a private space. Your home is a private space. The bathroom, when you go to the bathroom in the McDonald's, is a temporary private space. Not sitting out there in the dining area talking loudly. Not a private space. Public. Let's be clear, in 2018 it's absurd to pretend the ignorance of what would happen to a woman fired for speaking about sexism because he feels she got too uppity. He painted a target on everyone's back. He didn't just fail Peter and me, or even the employees for which he was responsible. He failed the entire industry. No, he didn't. He sent a message that acting as a poor representative of your company will get you fired. If I used language like she did when I was talking to one of my coworkers, I would be fired. If I had a public-facing position, such as a PR writer or a call center support person, and I use language like that, I would be terminated. I have seen it. I have seen people, I've seen it on the flip side. I've seen it where people have called into a number that I've worked for, screaming obscenities and not calming down, and essentially blaming people that were not to blame. And because the call was recorded, and they got fired. So this is a clear example of her trying to blame everybody else other than herself. She's blaming the firing on Mike sending this kind of crazy statement out there. Now she's saying what's happening to her social media is bots and sock puppets. And she goes on to say, I've got recruiters pinging me, promising they'll steer candidates away from ArenaNet and game design. Probably not. I really don't think that would be happening in any way, shape, or form. Peter stepped in to point out that his experience as a male dev was different. He stated pretty simple facts. I had no idea he was going to step in. I adore him. There it is. He was doing the right thing, and he deserves none of this crap. Yeah, he kind of does. The big question before we go further is, did either one of these deserve to be terminated? It is an almost very dicey situation to say she does, but he doesn't, because then that kind of proves her point. However, she is the bigger player in this, so genders be damned. I mean, if it was flip-flopped and he did this and she backed him up, Peter still deserves to be fired more because of what was said. So Mike has gone and said that she identified herself as an ArenaNet employee on Reddit and Twitter, and been discussing episode 3 storytelling with fans on Reddit, and then wrote the 25-part tweet about how we tell stories, relating it back to that episode. She was representing the company, and the expectation was to behave professionally and respectfully. On time or not, holiday or not, if you are going to post what she posted in a public forum, no matter the day or time, you are acting as an agent of the company. That's the fact over here, and that's what happened. So now you have other devs chiming in over here, like Scott Benson calling them cowardly pieces of shit, the developer of Night in the Woods. Denoir, of course, denies it, saying, in a world where discussion should be encouraged and not belittled, yet the opposite becomes reality. I've apparently found myself in the midst of a war I never intended to partake in. And he added the hashtag, I'm a feminist, later, not beforehand. Price says she has no regrets about her response to Dewar, although she said she might have moderated her language a little, given that the term asshat was apparently the sticking point for ArenaNet. Maybe would have used condescending jerk instead. No, you shouldn't have had that kind of a response, period. If you wanted to be respectful and not be maybe taking out a super bad day on the guy, say, okay, I see your post over here. What are your credentials? I mean, like, have you ever done this? Where are you coming from? Is this opinion? Is fact? I mean, there's other ways that you could have gotten around to a discussion with him without immediately being on the, not even defensive, being on the offensive over here. And she plans to regroup and look at her options and see what she can do and everything like that. Now, I do agree with one point that she mentioned, that there's going to be a bit of a target on her back going forward. not because of something other people did, but because of her own actions. She's proven that she could be a liability for a company, not even in a public facing position. I mean, her Twitter profile here is not necessarily a public facing position for the company, but she made it as such when she chose to bring work items to her public Twitter. A public facing position for a company would be like a PR guy, or the people who run Wendy's Twitter and come up with all the funny stuff. I mean, if they literally cursed somebody out on a Twitter post, that person would probably be in a lot of trouble, and the community would be in just as big of an uproar as they would, and they don't even know who's doing that. They would just be mad at the entity that is controlling Wendy's Twitter. If somebody said, so some rando asshat is going to tell us how to cook a burger, the Wendy's Twitter account would never say that because they understand the power of what they're doing. Jessica didn't, and that's why she's in the trouble that she is. And again, let's not forget about her comments when Total Biscuit passed away. This woman, going through her Twitter, going through the articles on Polygon and The Verge, and especially her responses here on this second Polygon article, the one where they directly interviewed her, she is one of those people that lives in that eggshell reality where they just construct that thin shell around themselves, and anything that threatens it immediately gets attacked or blocked, often with her salty language. She's going to be trouble where she goes, and I think ArenaNet probably knew it was a little bit of a risk picking her up, maybe hoping that she could help internally and balance the scales a little bit in a male-dominated field, and instead just took stuff too far and invented an issue where there was none. And if you want an honest comparison, really go find Sid Alpha on YouTube. Look at his videos on Star Mazer and the Alex Maurer incidents and everything like that. They are Alex and Jessica are very, very similar. I mean, Alex is really unhinged and literally delusional in her stuff, but Jessica is certainly pushing it. And to harp on ArenaNet getting on her for the rando asshat thing, she's boiling it down into one thing she could try to explain away, and in all honesty, all parts of it are part of it, and she can't explain it away. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Tell me what you think down below, and do obviously note that when it comes to this supposed mom mentality that's going on in Reddit of like, hey, we can just point our finger at anybody and get them fired now, do not partake in that. I do not believe in that. I truly believe that was not the case of what happened here, and that it was not a public uproar that was like, oh my god, we don't like her, you need to get rid of her and everything like that. Do not in any way, shape, or form buy into that, nor get involved with a group like that. Treat this like an isolated incident that somebody set themselves up for, and move on from there. Don't tie it to others. Don't make it a thing like, oh, we're going to go for this guy now too. Like, that is absolutely ridiculous. I do kind of feel, certainly in Peter's case, but even in hers, a warning should have been given to her. If she's never had a conversation with management and HR about her online persona and everything like that, in this case, what probably should have happened is that ArenaNet should have asked her to silence her Twitter account for about 30 days or so, about a month. Maybe make a post right before it happened and said, in light of recent events, I'm taking some time off of social media, blah, blah, blah. You know, kind of give a neutral thing. continue her job there, and at the end of the 30 days come back with an apology to the community and say something like, I apologize for how I came across in the beginning of July. I often deal with situations that perhaps you people don't understand, and when I read his post, I immediately jumped into that mode and did not properly give him the credit that this person deserved, that he wasn't doing this thing, and I overreacted. My apologies. Like, let's move on. That's probably what I would have done, unless there was like an internal file building on her where maybe she hadn't talked to people directly, but they knew she was a little bit of an issue. So this woman's got a history on her Twitter. She's got a history in the industry. She's made the Total Biscuit comment. There's definitely a problem with this woman. So if you're thinking about picking her up, maybe not the best idea. So take care, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video.